can see all the people trickling in.
Perfect.
Hey, everyone.
Good morning, good afternoon, and evening to some. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll kick straight off into it. I think it's going to be a pretty jam-packed webinar here with Rajiv. This is actually the second one that he and I have run, and it's clearly hitting the mark with regards to the volume of people that are interested to either get the recording or to be here live. And it makes a lot of sense. The feedback we received from the prior webinar, where we went into quite a bit of depth in umbrella contracts and just some do's and don'ts within Autotask, was that can we go a little bit deeper? There seemed to be a few questions around like foundational level decisions that you can make within Autotask PSA. And Rajiv's a real specialist in that with regards to previous experience working at Autotask for a long time, plus running his own consultancy now in helping people get more out of Autotask. So there's really 5 or so different areas that we'll go through today. And we hope that if there's, and I would also note if you've got questions during the actual presentation or during the webinar, just pop it into the chat and we'll do our best to weave it in there, and or there's a Q&A at the very end. So in terms of the agenda today, just quick hello from us, as we would normally do. Then this is where we go into the 5 layers of building from the foundation right the way up to the reporting levels that everyone wants to achieve with going ahead with a system such as Autotask. A few do's and don'ts. We actually have to help you all analyze your own current setup within Autotask. There's actually we've built a form which will help grade in these specific areas and then offer some suggestions at the tail end of it, just to, hey, it's sparkling clean, it's perfect, or hey, here's some areas that you may want to just consider and maybe dial up. Q&A throughout and or towards the end. And then we've got some, let's call it, new information surrounding the umbrella contract, which I think is extremely important to share and pertinent to anyone who's considering and or has already rolled them out. Some good stuff, some not so good stuff, but we'll touch on that certainly at the very tail end. So in terms of introductions, my name's Adam. I'm one of the co-founders of Cloud Olive, and I was very fortunate to work at Autotask from about 2011 to 2 years after Dado took us over, so for a good 8.5 years. And one of the very early lessons that I learned at working at Autotask was the contracts module is the heartbeat of that system, and if you get it right, you're going to love the product. If you don't get it right, it's a really difficult, hard system to ever get your hands to get your head around. And I think it's the same for all PSAs. And one of the problems that kept coming up and our MSP partners would ask us was all around the fluctuations of licenses every month across all the different suppliers. You might have 15 different vendors. There was no solution. So Cloud Olive set off six and a bit years ago now to try and solve, can we stop revenue leakage? And it has now morphed into much more than just a reconciliation product, if you will, but more around how do we assist in gathering hard to find information for yourself around your month-end recurring billing processes. And there's a couple of steps in this webinar where we will actually go into Cloud Olive, and I want to show you some very specific data points that are extremely hard to find, but necessary to have total billing confidence across the board. So, Rajiv, do you want to give a quick opener to yourself as well? Then we'll kick into it.
Sure will, Adam. And thanks for that lead up, and thanks everyone for joining us today. I can already see a bunch of familiar names there that have joined, so great to see some folks here that already know myself and Adam. My name is Rajiv. As Adam alluded to, we both worked at Autotask for a bunch of years. I've worked there for about 8 years, and since about 1.5 years, I run my own consulting business. So still doing what I love, and that is, spreading the Autotask gospel, which is why we're here, of course. And definitely echoing what you're saying there, Adam, around the contracts being the trickiest part of Autotask to get right. Because there's definitely some best practices out there to take to heart and really make sure to make your, Autotask work for you instead of, the other way around. And I really love what you're doing with the Autotask customers as well. Like really helping them to cut out the manual work and just, make sure that you're not missing any revenue. Because ultimately, every MSP, every company exists to generate a profit in the end, right? And if you miss your services, if your billing is just a struggle, then it's not going to be a fun time. Um, so yeah, hopefully some of the best practices that we'll share today will help you guys ultimately streamline your billing and just just make sure you've got everything in order.
Perfect. And I think overarching, gaining more confidence that the decisions you've made in Autotask are right for yourself now for the next handful of years as well. In terms of just an option for those who aren't familiar with Cloud, there's a really good case study that we ran with an Autotask partner of ours based out in Europe. And just some high level items that some pain points they had that might resonate with you, that they had 20 plus different vendors that they were reselling every month and no single pane of glass that they could see where they were underbilling or overbilling or double billing or any mismatch between what they're buying and what they're selling. And also from a one of the pieces we'll touch on today is source of truth, and having confidence of that is really, really important to bill accurately to the end client, especially when it comes to, for every service, but especially when it comes to user-based billing. And they can leverage the data that's coming out of Cloud Olive, the direct sync from Partner Center in Microsoft, to be able to customize which users actually get billed out at what amount to their end clients through AT. So QR code there, if it's of interest to you, jump on that. But with that behind us now, let's go through the analogy that we want to work on today. So we see the getting Autotask right as building a meaningful skyscraper, the skyscraper being your business at the end of it. Okay. So the layers that we're looking at here is starting at the bottom and getting each of these right. Once you get the baseline correct, moving into the next one, to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. And in our experience, or certainly in my experience, when you pick up Autotask and it's new to you, quite often people might jump into the contract section and just start building things out and going, oh, I can't save it because I need this. Okay, I'll go add that. And you start almost going back down the layers to quickly put something in to be working in the middle layer. And that's understandable because it's such a beast of a system. But Rajiv has a really phenomenal deep lens on getting the foundation right, way deeper than what I will ever personally understand. Same goes for the billing codes themselves. At the contract level, that's generally when Cloud Olive steps in and can help and keep an eye on everything and keep it all true and reflective. But the underpinnings are so important that Rajiv's in a really good spot, having worked with hundreds of MSPs, to be able to just provide some guidance. And then at the top end there, obviously, once you get the contracts right, it's business as usual, getting the reconciliation and really importantly, just you bill your customers, they're confident to pay, you're confident in the numbers and the site, and you get on with other things. You come back around the next month and do it all again. So getting this right, okay, so getting these 5 areas pristine to your own MSP, and also knowing that you may not be able to get every report that you possibly could ever want because of some of the decisions that are made early on, but getting this right for yourself, it leans in. I can start in any different area of this. You can just work through some of them, but just having total confidence, you're not leaking any revenue. We ran another webinar last week actually with another consultant, but on the ConnectWise side, and talked a lot around the cost to revenue speed that you can get, and I think that actually leans in quite nicely with if you invoice quicker in the month and get money back in quicker in the month, then your conversion cycle is a hell of a lot shorter. Rajiv will touch on, no doubt, some white space visibility that he's really hot on, and a lot of his clients are actually requesting, or he's helping them get that visibility, which is not that easy out of AT. And it's just a scalable PSA structure. Like, getting this right means you don't need to re-engineer, or have it in the back of your mind that you need to re-engineer every 12 months. Like it's a 3 to 5 year plan that you've got in the back of your mind, that everything's purely in alignment. So Rajiv, I'll hand it over to yourself. Is there anything else you want to add to some of the inputs or outcomes that we're looking at here?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I really do love the analogy of a skyscraper here, or a building of sorts, because it is, a foundation that you build your company on. And certainly, a lot of you MSPs out there are, of course, you're growing, you're, maybe making acquisitions, you're, maybe joining a group. And that makes it all the more important to make sure that your foundations are strong and they're good. And certainly for all the kind of group focused MSPs out there, it might actually go a long way to build that foundation in a similar fashion in all of your different MSPs, so that you can also report over those different business units in the same manner. So it goes for some people probably a little bit further than just their own auto task, but also being able to report on multiple instances in the same fashion. And for that, you need to have some uniformity in your setup of Autotask, especially on the billing codes. And so yeah, let's move into some of the finer details now. Most of you out there probably are aware that the billing codes are primarily used to then link up to a general ledger account. I just wanna just a quick show of hands. Who does their billing from Autotask? Who's here today? Okay, I can see a good few hands there. That's great. So that means you're getting some of the most important values there from Autotask that it can generate. Wow, it seems like almost all of you guys do the billing out there from Autotask. So that's great news. So most everyone is aware that the billing codes, they're used to link up to the general ledger account. So could you move on to the next slide for me, please, Adam? So just to kind of illustrate what we're talking about here, you might have a bunch of different general ledgers. These are just examples, but they're kind of taken from real world examples here. And if you can just move the slide one further, that's some examples of billing codes here. And what I want to highlight here is that I have structured these billing codes, especially the three middle ones, the service codes, to specify which layer that you're supporting they apply to, right? And if you then go to the next slide there for me, Adam, what we can then do is we can then link a bunch of different services to one or more to a billing code, and one or more billing codes, service codes could be linked to just a single general ledger account. So you can get some real granular reporting from your Autotask while still having a very simplistic general ledger structure in your bookkeeping system. Okay.
Rajiv, can I just quick question? This is something I'm curious on. When you work with new partners, do they, in your experience, have they generally, when they take on an Autotask, have they generally just gone, our general ledger looks like this now? Hey, I want to impart this and import the, I basically want this to be reflected directly into Autotask without taking a moment to think, actually, what do we want to achieve longer term with the reporting capability, both in whatever accounting package and within Autotask?
Yes. Yeah. So you hit the nail on the head there. So in most cases, people just copy basically their list of general ledgers onto the billing codes, and then just be done with it, which in my mind is really you're missing out of some great value there, because you could have so much more granular reporting instead of just looking at the general ledger account. And what I always like to give as a pro tip here, especially on the service codes, is think of them as service categories, right? So think of them as service categories. We've got all of our services that apply to workstations. We've got our services that apply to servers. We've got our services that apply to infrastructure, or Microsoft revenue. So that's how you can get really granular in terms of reporting, but still have a very simplistic, bookkeeping structure in terms of the general ledgers. So with that, shall we move on to the next slide, Adam?
How often should people review these things, do you think? Because I know in our general ledger, we've definitely got too many in our own, and we don't even have all these different components that an MSP and complexity that an MSP would have in theirs. How often, like, should they be auditing that almost, or thinking about cleaning that up?
Yeah, love that question. Yes, certainly, I would probably advise to look at it at least once a year. Why? Because, yeah, if you think about the service codes as service categories, there's going to be new services that you probably add to your portfolio every year. And certainly what I see in the market as well is that a lot of you MSPs out there, you're couple years ago it was just IT support, right? Nowadays you get security, you get compliance, you get all these kinds of extra sources of revenue, and you probably want to be aware of what opportunities you have to sell into your customer base, and that's really where thinking of the service codes as service categories really sticks out, because there's some tools out there and some ways that you can then use to report on that white space opportunity.
Yeah, cool.
Does that answer your question sufficiently, Adam?
It does, yeah. I was sort of selfishly asking it for myself as well in some regards. But...
Yeah, no. I mean, I always love geeking out with you about Autotask, So,
yeah.
So yeah, ask away, man. Ask away. Cool. Yeah. So how to structure the service codes. I mean, we already kind of touched on this, and there's a bunch of different ways that you can structure this. Now, in the example that you just saw on the slide, we've structured it just, pretty simply on, the layer that it applies to. So, again, workstation, servers, infrastructure, security. There's probably a few more layers that we could think of. I've also seen MSPs that structured more along, what proposition their customers are procuring from them. So if you have like a bronze, silver, gold type construction, you might say, well, I've got some gold services, got some bronze services, got some silver services. And I also see people making a combination even of both. So you can get quite a granular service code structure that really tells you, which services you're selling to which customers, which category they belong to, really.
Yeah, cool. And I'll move on to this one. So, and we've been Rajiv and I have been going back and forwards on this for a while now, trying to go, how do we display quite a lot of information that's so critical to everyone who's going to be watching this, in terms of the decisions you choose to make early on in your PSA means you may not be able to get all of the data that you potentially want out of the end of it. So I'll give you some examples, right? If we said to you, hey, Mr. MSP, Miss MSP, do you want to be able to report on vendor profitability? You'd go, yep. Do you want to report on customer profitability? You go, of course we do. Do you want to report on, you do some bundles? Do you want to go and report on packages? They go, yeah, of course we do. And do you want the unit price and unit count to be correctly displayed to your customer on the invoice? You're like, Adam, of course we need that. It's actually, there's not a silver bullet to this when it comes to billing out of Autotask in terms of where you can have everything. So taking a step back and go, what do we really, really want to understand? Like, I think if you're doing a package or a bundle of sorts, then with that in mind, you may understanding the Datto SaaS protection, which is a small component of that bundle. Like, we don't need to understand the revenue associated with that. Okay. It's a trade-off. It's always going to be a trade-off. So the way in which we've looked at this here is the PSA setup on the left-hand side. Very simply, on the first one is we have a service from the vendor. We have a service within Autotask. It's a one-to-one relationship. If the unit count on the vendor says 10, we bill for 10. Very clean, very simple. With that, you get vendor profitability, you get customer profitability. It's not really a package, right? So we've said not applicable. And of course, unit price and is then displayed on the invoice at that level. So very simple and clean. Now, this is where it gets a little bit different. Okay, so I'll actually start. I'll do the last one in mind, right, and then I'll hand it over to Rajiv, because this is where he spent a lot of time and effort thinking about this and working with some partners. So you bundle one line. Now, like in doing so, what bundling into one single line item in your PSA gives you, you only need to update one count from one data set each month and bill out. Like it's more of an invoicing out problem solving. From a reporting and further reconciliation and all the other things you may want, there is no way to then be able to do that, period. Okay. So if you bundle things into one line, sure, it's $100 you're selling that for. You use a business premium count as of a point in time, bill for 10, happy days, move on. Knowing that they've got 8 or 12 of another thing deployed and not getting serviced, you give up that for speed and simplicity around getting the bills out the door. Okay. What we would often find is that trade-off after a period of time for a growing MSP becomes too risky, and we'll then look at other options such as like a one-to-one, but then rolling things up in the invoice. And that moves us into almost more of a roll-up capability within the invoice functionality within Autotask. And I'll hand it over to yourself, Rajiv, because I know you've done quite a bit of work on this. And if you've got any invoices that you've actually almost worked through and got some examples within Autotask at all, that might be good to just show people what we mean.
So we're finally at the part where I can share my screen, right?
You can share your screen. Go for it. Yeah.
All right. I'll go ahead and share the screen in a sec. But yeah, everybody wants to bundle, right? And it is such a tricky conversation, because there is no perfect way of doing it. If you bundle stuff, you lose some granularity somewhere, and on the one hand, you want to have that granularity. On the other hand, you might not want to, display all of that granularity on your invoices, and there's probably some options in between, right? So what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and break it down for you guys, and I will now go ahead and share the screen. So just bear with me a sec. I've closed down all my tabs there, Adam, so no worries, okay? Normally I'm a many-tab man, but now you get the rare side of seeing just 3 tabs in my browser. So just
when he shared earlier, I got immediate anxiety. I was like, how can you operate like that?
Yeah. So just want to take you through this little demo customer that I created just for this webinar. And we've got 2 contracts here, 2 recurring service contracts. I'll just break them down for you guys first, and then we'll look at the invoicing output, right? So we've got some managed workstations with some security add-ons. So we've got our services in here. See, so we've got like 5 services in here, all of them a different price. And we've got some managed servers. Now, of course, this is all, this is just an example. I didn't want to create a contract with like dozens of services on it, just, for simplicity's sake. The goal here is that you guys can actually follow it as well. So I just wanted to keep stuff simple. So that's what I've done here. So just 2 services on my server contract, right? Now, when we go to the invoice processing, I just want to show you some of these options that we've got here. So, just echoing the first option that Adam highlighted, just, not doing any bundling effectively means if we're pulling the preview, we just, get a breakdown of each and every service or bundle. You just display everything, very, very granular. Okay. So yeah, while this is probably the most accurate, or I guess the most clear, it does give some insights that you not all customers want to know what their managed service bundle is made up of, right? And not every MSP wants to show it either. So that's option 1. Then we've got option 2, and as you rightfully mentioned, it is actually a roll-up option in the invoices, and I'm happy to show as well where these invoice roll-up options are for anyone that's interested. But if we preview this one, you'll find that the invoice should look very differently. See, so now we've got only two line items. Now, I did itemize it here at the bottom, but that is actually an option. Again, very happy to show you guys where you can find that. But you can see how it just rolled all of these line items up just into these two here. So this is.
Can I just add one very small and important, because I think this looks great. Okay, I actually wasn't aware until we were preparing for this webinar that there was that breakout component down the bottom. So awesome there. If we wanted to then hide that altogether, so remove that tick box, which from a bundling perspective is where a lot of MSPs want to go. They want to show a unit count, and they want to then like roll it, like just have one single line that goes to the customer, but break things out in the inside Autotask. So I just want to draw everyone's attention to, in the top section there, untal, which I'm guessing is unit count.
So yeah, you're getting a bit of impromptu Dutch here as well. Yeah, so that's quantity.
For any Aussies and Americans that don't speak Dutch, that's unit count there. But what Autotask seems to do, and this is why we had the little asterisks on the right-hand side of that. It seems to have, they see everything's a unit count 1 down the bottom. For those different sections, it's then been summed up, okay, which may be a little bit confusing to the end client. You can remove the unit count altogether, maybe more confusing, maybe not. So this is where the real granular, there's not a single way to operate in, like for everything universally. There's always going to be a little trade-off. But I think seeing it at this level of detail is really helpful, so you can sort of make up your own mind for yourselves.
Yeah. Yeah, and what's also worth mentioning, of course, is here with the rate, it will also amalgamate it, which means it's going to vary. So that's why it also said it won't display a unit price, because the unit price may be varying. So this is the roll up by contract. Let me just go ahead and share the roll up by billing code, right? So this is actually where it will start to roll it up based on the service code that it's set under. See? And again, we get that rate varies. Now this one is actually in English, see? So no Dutch gibberish there. Well, at least there is a few Dutchies on the call. I did.
Yeah, for sure. We chatted with everyone here.
Yeah. So again, different way of rolling stuff up. But yeah, I think both of them, could very well apply. So what I just want to show you real quick here is where we can actually do all of this stuff, right? So let's just go into the invoice template, and we'll go into the invoice body. And here's where you have that roll-up option. See, now, most of the roll-up options apply to just labor, but the real goal is in this one, the all by roll-up description. And when you press the little cog, you can actually choose what you want to roll it up by, right? And you can also select which line item types you want to roll up. So in this case, we might say, well, we'll roll up all services, but we'll still, break down every labor entry, right? Or you could just roll all of the labor entries up into, let's say, a ticket number, right? So really, there's a lot of possibilities here in terms of that, in terms of what you want to roll it up against. So there's this whole list. Not all of them are probably relevant, but yeah, really the world's your oyster on this one. So the roll up description one will give you the most options really. And the itemized one here, so that's this one here. So that little gray box of where it really broke down everything. You can also do it within each group, so then it would be more just on the invoice line item itself. or you can just, not itemize at all, just only display the bundles. And really, Autotask is flexible enough that you can say, well, customer one has this layout, customer two has a completely different layout. So yeah, you've got all the possibilities at your disposal here. So just wanted to show you not just what it leads to, but also how you would then be able to configure it. So yeah, hopefully that is all clear.
Very good. So let me just share I'll come back to my screen now. Thanks for showing those specifics as well, Rajiv. I think that just being able to visualize and then people go away and can tinker with it. Next,
Yeah, I don't want to keep it all like theoretical, I want to show everyone where the nitty-gritty parts of Autotask are. I mean, that's what everyone's here for, right? So
yeah, 100%. So the next layer here is getting the contracts right. Now, we won't spend, I suppose, too much time on this compared to some of the other modules, but there are some do's and don'ts or tips and tricks that I believe still ring true from when I was there from in Autotask many, many moons ago now. Just some recommendations around like the start dates that you choose on a contract. Like and again, I'd love to challenge any of this, right? Anybody on the call or Rajiv, if you so choose. But there's when we are looking at a new Cloud Ollie partner that runs Autotask, and we like their data then syncs with our system, and we look at a few things. The service naming convention to me is the number one most important thing at that level, that you need to have a good, concise construct to it. And we've talked a lot about that, and we've got some good blogs on that. The next is around the like the contracts. Now, two things. One is the naming conventions chosen, the volume of contracts that are actually how many you have. Like we've seen everything from one contract per client with everything to individual services on their own contract. Like we've seen both ends of that spectrum and everything in between. Now, again, there isn't a single way to do this. There never is with Autotask, which is why it's such a powerful tool. But the other one is the start dates. Like in our eyes, having all contracts start on the 1st of the month, and then if there's a new service that has started on the 16th of the month, and even if it's a Microsoft thing, still starting it on the 1st, the contract, but then starting the actual service itself at whatever service adjustment or prorate date that you want, the 16th as we called it. Having everything uniform from a contract perspective makes reporting so much simpler. So it's a bit of a cheat code if you don't do that. Like, and I know a lot of people on this call have done it because we've worked with you, right? But just keeping that in the back of your mind, if you're creating net new contracts for net new clients and all the rest of it, try to maintain that as the first. Anything else you would add to that, Rajiv?
yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so having contracts start at the first day of the month will ensure certainly monthly contracts are built on a calendar month as well. Instead of, let's say you would start a contract today, it would then bill from the 26th to the 25th of next month, which is just not great. Definitely a naming scheme. And yeah, just to provide some very concrete tips on a naming scheme, the best practice naming scheme is customer name dash and then whatever proposition it is. And that just seems to work quite well across the board. I also want to touch, Adam, on what you mentioned there just now around, chucking all services onto a single contract, or, breaking every service down into a separate contract. I just want to give everyone here some very clear guidelines on when should something be in a separate contract or not. And really, there's three main reasons to put something in a separate contract, and that is you have a different start and end date for certain services. So we see this a lot, for example, with NCE licenses from Microsoft that have their own start and end date, other than the other licenses from Microsoft that you might procure. So that's a reason to put something in a separate contract. Another reason for putting something in a separate contract is if different exclusions apply. So maybe you might have an arrangement with your customers where you say, well, for your workstations, you can call me all day, you get unlimited remote support. But when we need to go on site, that's actually going to generate an extra charge. Whereas maybe for servers, you actually do everything and you go on site and it's part of their contract as well. That's a reason for putting something in a separate contract if different exclusions apply in terms of what is in or out of scope. And then thirdly, a reason for putting something in a separate contract could also be reporting. So if you want to report separately on, let's say, the profit and loss of a certain service or certain contract, then you might want to create that as a separate contract. And the gist here is really that whenever your service desk engineers create a time entry and they select one of those contracts, then that time will register as a cost against that contract. So having separate contracts really makes sure you get great visibility on which contract your engineers are spending time and therefore costs on, and what impact that has on the profitability end of things.
And we just had a question come in. Can we adjust start dates that we've already like if you, I know the answer to this. So if you press submit and you have created a contract within AT, you're set with that. Is there there's no way around that, right? There's not, even if you haven't built out of it, it is what it is. It's a fixed entity. So the only way to do that would be when renewals come up, start them on the first, and or like spend a weekend drinking coffee and just work through it. And even on top of that, I believe the bulk creation tool has been is no longer active as well. Which
it's deprecated, unfortunately. Although, if there's people on this call that are really keen for a tool along those lines, one of my partners actually they ran into this, and they decided to fix this. So yeah, I can hook you up, right? So yeah, there's ways around that, but yeah, typically with any Autotask implementation, the whole creation of contracts is really the most complex and time-consuming data entry.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, cool. So just confirming, Rajiv, you still see the contracts on my screen? That's what's shared.
Yeah, for
cool.
sure. Yes.
So I'll kick on into the next bit, and this is a section very, very close to our minds and hearts and obsession at Cloud Olive is looking at the entire, I would almost call this as month-end billing when it comes to recurring items. Okay. Reconciliation is not the sexiest of words out there, and I think that it actually sells it short, both the complexity and also with MSPs moving more and more and more towards APIs from their suppliers, distributors, or the individual vendors or middleware, whatever it is, APIs does not, by any stretch, equal reconciliation at all. So APIs to the PSA are really an invoicing aid. When it and if it is accurate, you can then trust that. What it doesn't do is understand at all what your invoice from that supplier is going to look like. So the amount of money leaving your bank, to us, this is more on the reconciliation side. Beyond just lining up counts, it's looking at the amount of money that's going to leave your bank and going, are we making enough money across the vendor, distributor, and or individual services and SKUs? The other piece of the puzzle, which I'll actually jump into Cloud Olive, and I want to share something that's that is a data point that's really hard to see, right? How about items that aren't on a vendor API or are not on a vendor report anymore? It's because it's been decommissioned and or it's never been deployed, but there's something getting built out of Autotask. So just very quickly, right? So we'll walk through one simple example here of here are the X number of vendors that we resell. And in our web route down here, we can see that we've got 15 odd lines. There's one error, and we go, okay, cool. Let's just fix these things. So we push it back in. We don't want to prorate it. We just want to bill the whole month. And of course, because I've set that as reconciled, it won't by design. So if we're pushing this thing back, it's like, fine, we'll set that. And away it goes. So second to this, right? If I move this to reconciled now, this is us going, hey, I've done enough on Cloud Olive side. This vendor, even though it's not perfectly lined up, min billing, customer issues, whatever it is, we're happy with this and we're going to move on. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to grab this service name. I'm going to come over to our MRR Insights module. So that reconciliation down, that's that first point on that last slide that we looked at. What just has been extremely difficult data to underpin is actually, if we're looking at all of our services within Autotask, what services, if any, and I'm going to pick on this specific one here, what line items, so we see down here, right, last reconciled, when was it last viewed from the vendor side, report, invoice, usage, whatever the data set that's been ingested and looked at, when was the last time it was reconciled down? And we go, cool, a lot of these things are green. When you've got 500, 1,000, 2,000 lines in here and 100 different services potentially or even more, being able to quickly go on the reverse side, which line item are we billing a customer, Able West Coast here, whereby we don't have anything, we've got no proof that it's in the vendor side. It means one of two things. It actually got sweet. The customer asked for us to stop, like the customer canceled or upgraded that service. So we correctly went in there and canceled it off from the vendor side. Cool. And we forgot to do it in the PSA side. So we're just flat out, we're just misbilling, overbilling them. The other side, and probably more sinister and more problematic, would be the customer believes they're paying for a security product or this product, and we're actually not. We've never deployed that service to them. So if something actually ever happened, like potentially big issues, right? So that to us is now the 360 reverse reconciliation from data coming, like from an input in and going back, right? From the input now being actually Autotask recurring services at a very granular level going, hey, when was this thing last paired back at the vendor side? That's the 360 view from a reconciliation, which can offer internally for yourselves a lot of confidence. Like that solves revenue leakage and will reduce down big questions coming back from your customers. It doesn't solve all billing queries that come back. What this does not solve is the customer saying, why are you billing me for 12 of this thing when we've only got 10 staff in our office? Different problem, right? Different problem, which leans us into the next section, which is customer expectations and ongoing trust. How quickly do people pay your bills? How quickly, like how few questions come back to you on a monthly basis? So the source of truth that we touched on here, every single service within Autotask should have a link back to a data set or a portal, something that you go to and go, if that thing says 10, we bill for 10. You can then articulate that right the way back into the business, right? So like many of them would be Microsoft, whatever's active, whatever we're billing, whatever we're getting billed for should just go through, especially if it's integrated in, like we just follow that, fine, no problem. For many other things, just working through all the different services, you go and go, what would we rely on for that? Is it the invoice? Is it a point in time report? Is it the fact that they've got 10 business premium, we bill 10 for this other thing regardless? For us, it's about showing this information to you. Okay, so very quickly, if we have, and I'll just open this up here. If we have a couple of different things here. So on a grouping perspective, just bird's eye view, this is a quality control check against a device piece or a user piece here. So what it's saying here is at the service level within Autotask across an individual customer, doesn't matter if it's across different contracts or anything like that, if they have 10 workstations, meaning that's one of your sources of truth you trust for whatever reason, you update that thing first, it's automated, you really trust that you got that on lockstep. Oftentimes users in Microsoft, oftentimes workstations in RMMs are generally really well looked after, generally, onboarding, offboarding. Not always, but generally. If this thing says 10, hey, Cloud Olive, just begin telling me whether or not this does or doesn't actually no longer lines up. And again, coming back to the bird's eye view, so this inside of the MRR insights, the grouping that we just talked about there. So if we got a group, I think it was the device. What we want to try and find is any errors. So if things line up perfectly, the anchor matches the secondary, whatever, we're all good. Out of all of my customers that have these services, legal help, which I'll now just grab because I want to understand and just quickly show you. So remove the discrepancies, keep the group filter on. And then here we have, okay, my RMM is saying 45. The quantity that we're billing out for this 365 backup is not that. We're potentially, if we want to align it to that, we're going to make an extra $104. So from that side, we want, our belief is that it's the MSP's responsibility to see this stuff and then act on it beforehand. Oftentimes the queries that come back and the trust that gets slightly dented on an invoice is because these numbers don't match into the end client. They don't care that the vendor says this or whatever else. This here would potentially go where we're not actually restoring or backing up a number of their licenses. A problem that to the MSP should be thought about and discussed with the end client to work out exactly why it is, or just fixed in the background for the next billing cycle. So going back to, if you break things apart in the PSA and track the accurate counts, whether you show the customer or not, this sort of visibility is achievable. If you bundle into one line, you do away with that possibility, and you sort of it's just harder to see this sort of information. The last piece is when it comes to user counts. So we will often ask, what's your definition of X? What's your source of truth for this user? And they'll go, it's the active business basic or the business premium. We go, okay, cool, you can do that. What do you do when there's unassigned licenses? And they go, yeah, that's hard. Listen, the distributor doesn't give us that information. So just as an option, wherever you get that info from, or Cloud Olive has the ability where we read that information direct from Partner Center and just offer a source of truth for sanity checking and or for leverage into billing and reconciling, either back to other services or truly using this data to actually up and down the counts because you trust the information. We knew when we built this module called NC Easy to help make that non-easy process a little bit easier. We can see the actual users. The other thing we can do here is if you've got an internal license that you choose not to bill, you can begin excluding these things and the system will just remember it month on month on month. Okay. So even though we've got 12 available, committed, 11 assigned, we actually only want to bill for 10. We can now pull that number 10 out and provide it in a way that can be linked back to services within Autotask. And for user counts, whatever you decide to be your definition, like especially user-based and anything device-based, I think a really good exercise is just walking around the key teams inside your MSP and say, hey, what's your definition for X and Y? And just seeing what comes back as a leadership team, trying to standardize on that, because I have a material impact to the sales rep selling this thing for the first time, as well as the customer knowing, okay, if this goes to 11, we know we're going to get billed for 11. Okay. Anything you want to add to that, Rajiv? Anything coming out to yourself or any queries or from anybody else?
Yeah, I really do love what you're doing here because this is such a challenge for a lot of MSPs out there. Making sure that whatever it is that you've provisioned, you're actually billing, or the other way around. It is just, if you get it wrong, it just hurts on so many levels. And as you rightly say, customer trust is the most important thing, right? If your customer trusts you, they'll not nitpick your invoices. Whereas if they don't, you're just in a pickle, right? So, really, to my mind, Cloud Olive not only caters to just billing accuracy, if you will, but also ultimately to a higher customer satisfaction, and higher customer satisfaction leads to better retention. And it's just so many ripple effects that you achieve with this. So I really love that piece. And I can see some of the folks in the chat love it as well. Like I love how people say cool, when we're looking at this kind of stuff and just really geeking out about it.
I think the level of complexity to get it all right, it won't be solvable and hands off day one. And I think everyone just needs to recognize that, partly because distributors and vendors make their own errors and mistakes as well. So having a way to just quickly see things that look slightly off, and then have the user who knows the customer, and the user of Cloud Olive in this instance knows the vendors and any edge case nuance that everybody seemingly has. Being able to quickly identify, and then as a person deciding what the right action and protocol to actually be is to then take forward. That to us is as Cloud Olive, like that to me is our responsibility to try and help with, but empowering the user to have really deep insights and just quickly be able to action what they see as being correct. And this is the last part of it, if you will, in terms of foundations correct at the beginning. This stuff should be a lot easier, a lot more scalable. You bring on new clients, you bring on a new product. There's a system that underpins it from the bottom up that you got high confidence is the right construct of AT. So next steps. Okay, how much time we got? About 10 minutes. So there's a we put together, like, collectively with the two insights and like experiences that Rajiv and Cloud Olive has. We put together I think it's about 12 questions or so, really quick on type form, and it will just provide a just a score at the end to give you an idea of where you're tracking in these key different components. I'd recommend, if you're curious, it's like a very basic audit, if you will, that you can just do in your own time, take a couple of minutes. In terms of the possible next steps for either side, and in a couple of sides time, we do have just some things we just want to share around the umbrella contracts as well, but more QR codes. I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard that they're about to run out of the available number of QR codes available. And at some point, there's only so many formations that this thing can do. I don't know if that's true or not, but I read it on something a couple of weeks ago.
That's crazy.
We're doing our part to deplete them pretty quickly. From a Cloud Olive perspective, if you want to have a demonstration with one of our team members, we've got people across the globe now from like facilitating information share at that front. Book in there, or within that as well. If you come through this webinar, more than happy, when you're ready, right? Just get some of the core principles set up, like sync the PSA across, start looking at those grouping drift that's happened across user or across devices, as an example. If you've got Autotask set up in that way, like, have a quick call with us to work out what have I done with my naming conventions. You can quickly see the start date variance if that's something that you've got under that potentially is a problem. Also, we'll very quickly give you a chance to look at duplicate services that have crept into Autotask over time. Really hard to find, decommission things that actually still live on within some sort of niche contracts down there in AT. And then when you're ready to rock and roll, we're more than happy just to give you full access to the system, get a couple of vendors in there, whatever vendors you want, and just run it, right? Get real comfortable. And you're like, yep, this is going to materially help our world moving forward. And then over to yourself, Rajiv, in terms of what's in behind the your QR code there.
Yes. Yeah, actually, before we do that, someone asked a really great question, Adam, that I just wanted to run past you whilst we still have some time. The question is, can you upload your sources of truth for devices such as data RMM to Cloud Olive to use as a primary group, or do you have to match the data RMM data to an existing service in AT and then use that as a grouping?
Good question. So either way, actually, what we would generally ask in that scenario is, do you always want the RMM count to in lockstep match? So even if something is different, if it says 10 in RMM and 12 in some other device-based thing, you always want it to bill for 10. If that's the problem you're looking to solve, what we would likely do is either we can spin out from the reconciliation module. We can go, hey, if there's a customer with RMM, create 2 line items that we can then link back into the vendor. Okay, we can do that so it's all in one vendor, or we can just use data RMM data set for vendor A, RMM, data RMM data set for vendor 2, and we keep them actually split apart from one another. We just link them back to other lines. That allows for very quick updates. Now, what that does not do is, like, it solves one problem. What it doesn't do, and this is the trade-off, is if, what's another device-based service it might, whatever it might be, right? We would still want to bring in that data set and link it back to the correct numbers. And now we've got 12 in the other vendor set, and 10 in now against the RMM updated service, right? So there's a discrepancy of 2. Would probably switch off any pushback. We would rename the vendor within Cloud Olive going read only, like making it really clear that this is purely and simply a quality control check. Doesn't impact billing, impacts your own like confidence in the fact that you've deployed the right volume of things to that end client. So yeah, there's actually, depending on how you want it to update would be how we then devise the right solution to that problem. First step, set up the groupings, because it takes 2 seconds to do. See it and then decide, actually, whoa, this thing's wild. We need to then go back and begin like picking a data set, source of truth, link it back to the service. Really, like, it's actually quite a common solve once we understand exactly what you're trying to do with it. Awesome.
Thanks for weighing in on that one, Adam. Awesome.
So just on this one, right? Is there any, like, feel free if there's any other questions to crop in. I'm just mindful that we've got 3 or 4 minutes left. One of the pieces of the new information that unfortunately came to light with regards to umbrella contracts is it's not supported via the API at all at the moment. So being able to push changes from Cloud Olive back in, limited in its scope at the moment. We can do some things in there. We can see that the data is getting pushed in. We can't formally trust it. So we've actually taken like the responsible step until that is corrected to minimize, like, to actually then direct you to make the change back into Autotask. Very simply make that change back in Autotask, but it's just unsupported. The feedback we've received from a very credible source within Autotask just this week is the fact that certain aspects of umbrella contracts have been pushed out in terms of the timings. There was a Q1 update that's now being pushed out, obviously because we're at the tail end of it, but maybe pushed out a little bit further than any of us would want. But the API portion of that seems to be a secondary project in and of itself, which can run separate to that. So although we don't have a time frame for it, we're hopeful that it's going to be a hell of a lot quicker than some of the other core features, such as renewal dates being exposed via API, via widgets, via live reports, which isn't there, which to me is probably the biggest gap still to this day.
Yeah, there's definitely some work to do still on the umbrella contract. So for now, I don't consider them very much finished, although they do hold a promise of some very interesting features that should be rolling out, somewhere during the run of this year. The tricky bit with roadmaps is that they sometimes are subject to change. So we'll need to hold our breath a little bit for some of the cooler functionalities to come out. So for now, apart from a few like really specific use cases, I haven't implemented them very much. But as soon as they're done, I'm definitely gonna have a play around with them. And if anyone's interested in one of those like really edge use cases that I ran into that actually was working quite well with the umbrella contracts was I have this MSP customer that has a whole bunch of domains with like different billing cycles and different start and end dates, and where with the traditional recurring service contracts or doing it via configuration items, they would have all kinds of separate contracts, separate assets. Now they were able to just have one contract and have all those domains in there. But that was really just the one use case right now. So we'll have to be a little bit patient to get some of those really cool features that are still, probably still somewhere in the Autotask Skunkworks basement, right? But really looking forward to that. And probably as soon as it's here, you'll probably see myself and Adam back on the webinar again and just geeking out about that part of Autotask as well.
Spot on. Awesome. Listen, we're right on the hour. Thank you everyone for the engagement and questions. Hope it was of use. Get in touch when you're ready. And for clients that are on the call, if there's things that are interested that you want to go through with us, obviously, please just shoot us a note. We'll jump on a call with you and work through, especially around the reverse reconciliation piece. That's a newer piece of the puzzle. But yeah, thank you everyone. Big commitment from an hour for everyone here that's joined us. So we appreciate your time, and we'll speak to you very soon.
Thanks, and also thanks for having me here, Adam, and thanks for everyone joining. Really appreciate you guys carving out an hour of your precious time to be with us today, and certainly, hit us up if you have any questions. Just feel free to reach out through any means. Okay.
Awesome. See you guys. Cheers, Raju.
All right. Cheers. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.